we'll go. James, why do you think in that period in the 70s, when all popular songs up to that point had been Porter and Gershwin and very general in nature, why was this a time when personal revelation from songwriters became so popular? There really never been anything quite like that.
Well, I don't know exactly who you're. I'm sure you're referring to my music, but
yeah, your music and well, there was a series of Joni Mitchell's and the singer-songwriter who kind of opened up and bared some inner thoughts of their own there.
Well, it's hard to say, you know. Why? I guess it just sort of developed as a genre, I suppose.
There had never been. Was it because of the social upheaval of the times, or?
I don't know. You know,
I never thought about this.
Well, no, I haven't really. I never had really. I thought of it more in terms of. I feel as though a number of us came out of kind of folk music of the kind of what Waddy Wachtel calls the great folk scare of the '60s. But it was you know, that was a period of time that sort of formed me largely. I was listening to other music too. I was listening to country music and to rhythm and blues, what was on the radio down south in North Carolina, and some white and black gospel, and whatever my older brother Alex sort of exposed me to too. But largely the music that I connected with and that I identified with was sort of the coffee house folk music scene, you know, which was, I think, probably at the same in the same sort of context as university campuses in the '60s. That's what it felt like, anyway. You know, it was college towns, it was college-age audiences, academic contexts, sort of, you know, and the people that I think of associated with it, you know, I think of Dylan, I think of Tom Rush, I think of the Queskin Jug Band, I think of you know, Ian and Sylvia, Jesse Cole and Young, myself, Joni Mitchell, I mean many, many others, Joan Baez, Dick and Mimi Farina, you know, there were Carly Simon and her sister, the Simon sisters, too. I heard them. You know, a lot of it was a large context, and still is existing, but just in no way near the same way. There was also a lot of it had some country connections, and it had some sort of I guess what they call country blues connections too. Mississippi John Hurt, Reverend Gary Davis, Sonny Terry Brownie McGee, Lightning Hopkins. But all of it, I think the thing that it generally had in common is that it was very portable music, you know. It didn't use piano. It used basically a guitar or a guitar harmonica, banjo maybe, you know, and it was a very, for me, it was a very personal type of experience, you know. I remember spending long hours playing guitar in North Carolina. Felt relatively alienated. Maybe it was just adolescence, or maybe it was a combination of the way I was and the places I was. But in North Carolina, and then later when I went away to school, I spent a lot of time isolated by myself, and I just used to turn into the guitar. I played a lot of guitar. I was listening to all of the people I mentioned before and more, and I was also listening to the Beatles and what was on popular radio a lot, you know.
Well, when you did write, you did bear some very personal feelings and some thoughts. How did you react to to people's reaction to that?
You know, I didn't really think of them as being, at the time, as being that particularly personal. There were a couple of songs that were pretty personal, but generally speaking, they just seemed like love songs to me, or like, you know, I think Fire and Rain perhaps is a very personal song, and people, it was such a pivotal, you know, such it drew so much focus that I think that people have sort of connected me with that kind of a song. But in fact, you know, there were a lot of others that just seemed to me to be very, you know, from a personal point of view for sure, but just songs. You know, I didn't think of them as being particularly personally referred, you know, or autobiographical at the time.
I guess the Fire and Rain made such an impact that then the perception was of James Taylor opening his veins and bleeding for everybody, and then closing up the veins again. I mean, you're personified as this very personal kind of writer.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I shouldn't deny it. I am very. The stuff that I write does come from a very autobiographical place, and it's very self-referred.
In terms of autobiographical, was it how competitive was it in the Taylor family? Early on, was it were you all achievers or all battling, or wasn't there any of that at all?
I would say that there was some of that, but not an awful lot. Do you mean how competitive was it musically, or
musically, or every other way? You know,
Well, it didn't feel particularly competitive musically. No.
Was there a lot of music? Your mother was a singer.
Yeah, my mother actually had aspirations of being a professional singer. But it didn't seem to me, certainly, that there was any more music in our household than there was in any other house in the neighborhood.
You have, what kind of recollections do you have of the Beatles and Apple and that brief episode in your life?
Well, it was exciting. You know, those were very heady days, and it was just after Epstein died, and in the period of time after Epstein's death and Alan Klein's takeover, it was just, the place was wide open. You know, they were listening to everything. They were doing everything they could. You know, a lot of it was sort of misspent and wasted time and energy. But you know, the idea was still fantastic. It was there was so much access to Apple. And Peter Asher took the job with as head of A&R, and he was listening to everything that came across his desk. So I had coincidentally been in London trying to make a record. I had made a demo tape and was trying to take it around to various people. And when he heard it, he liked it, and
how much did the Beatles get involved at all, or?
Well, I think McCartney. I think he played it for McCartney and said that he liked this and would like to take it on as a project. And McCartney said, "I like it too. Go ahead." Paul played bass on one song, and Harrison sang on that same song.
Coincidentally, I just got a telex from Paul. I'm trying to get him here for tomorrow night. They're having this Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's right. He's having some disputes with the Beatles, the other two guys, and so he's trying to get settled. I don't know if he's going to show or not yet. He says he hopes to see me Wednesday night, but I don't know. But I did talk to him in England. He's still out there. They're all still battling, those guys, and doing it. They've gone through. This last year has been amazing. We put out in Capitol all those compact discs.
That's right. Fantastic release.
It is amazing that the ability of that music to stand up 20 years later.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
To make such an impact.
It's true. It really is true. In 1968, when I was signed there and was suddenly like daily up at those offices and sharing time in the studio really with them, you know, working in Trident Studio where they recorded the White Album. It was amazing, really, to be around that and to be, to have that be available. Yeah, it's terrific. It's unbelievable.
Well, later on, when success struck James Taylor, that was a rather turbulent period. How did you know, we never talked about it, but how did all that affect you, this onslaught?
Well, you know, I think that there really is there is a phenomenon of someone's music making it through that sort of intense public scrutiny, because I think it changes what you do and how you think of yourself, and it changes your motivations, and it shifts what your focus is. You know, it sort of takes in my case certainly, from a very interior kind of process of making music and as you said before, sort of expressing things, personal things through music. You know, sort of finding a personal outlet for things through music, to thinking of it in terms of stuff that was being prepared for a huge audience, and that process can be very disruptive to people, especially for people who. It seems to me as though musicians, in many cases, and songwriters are particularly ill adapted to that kind of public life. You know? I think that there is something very. It almost requires a stage of alienation and sort of isolation to really get into your music and into your. That's why I think you saw so many burnouts and so many, you know, so much confusion, so much. I mean, you know, you can just keep on counting people who went down. And I'm not saying that was because they became popular and successful and commercial and marketable and incorporated into a larger, perhaps more capitalistic kind of system. But certainly that it didn't help to clarify things. You know? And it's hard to make that shift. You know? I mean, I feel now at the age of 40, 20 years after I sort of emerged onto the scene, I feel as though I'm still just trying to figure out what it is I do in this phase of it, how exactly I relate to this phase of the thing. So it is a potentially disrupting thing. Of course, that's another one of the miracles of the Beatles, is that in spite of the fact that they came on with their best work repeatedly after after wave of this this public this press onslaught and stuff, and yet they continue to come up with more and more meaningful stuff. It was really amazing to me that they managed it, because no one else really. I can't think of anyone else who survived it well. Maybe there are some who thrive on it and who do well in that.
Well,
maybe there's some.
You're one of the very few who have been touched by that phenomenon that we refer to as being the moment. No one remains the moment long, not Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, but they remain big or they remain successful as you did. But you were the moment. My God, there was a phenomenon that was happening at that time, as it's happened with others. Do you recall how you felt during that period, or what you were thinking?
Well, I don't suppose I really recognized it until after it had happened, and it's the sort of thing where you don't, it's hard to really believe it's happening, or yeah, it's hard to know. Of course it's phenomenal. It's fantastic. It's great. It's like feeling that you have that kind of power, and that you have that kind of recognition, and that you're validated so completely. And it was still, now that sort of the phenomenon of celebrity, everybody's got 15 minutes that Andy Warhol used to talk about, that's something that I think people are more sort of used to and cynical about, or at least have considered their opinions about. But when it happened to me, it seemed like for me, uncharted territory. It seemed really amazing.
And you had some difficulty with it too.
Well, I think so. I think everybody does. I don't think there's anyone whose work hasn't been affected by the phenomenon of celebrity.
What, who did you turn to? Was it the band itself that was your kind of life that you kind of took refuge with?
Well, I think I turned to a lot of things, but the thing that you tend to hang on to and focus on is the fact that you perform these songs and that there is a specific task, a musical thing that you do, and that process is one that is familiar to you and real and sort of undeniable, so you continue to just focus on the work. But I got into drugs extremely heavy for a long period of time, and I think that's something with its own progression too, and that's also a very familiar thing, something that happens very we've seen happen repeatedly for people in this line of work. There were always drugs around, and in a sense, it's being a musician, working late hours and working a lot of bars and places where liquor and a lot of drugs are consumed, and being it's a recreational line of work. And so really, rather than the exception, I think that availability of drugs and drug abuse was really the rule where I was. And I don't think that's so much the case anymore. I think it's possible for you to find easily available to you in music now a way of life which doesn't include drugs. But back then,
No.
that wasn't the case. Back then it was just everywhere, and it was recreation. And to a certain extent, when you give somebody millions of dollars and millions of fans and amazing accolades in the press and incredible support from all areas and just amazing focus and emphasis, you feel as though you should have what it is you want, in spite of the fact that you're 20 years old and really don't know what it is that you want and haven't figured out how to find it. But you expect to be able to have to feel good. You expect to be able to feel good and to have what you want. And I think that it's never that simple. It's finding I don't know what hackneyed phrase you prefer: peace of mind, or serenity, or just your proper place in your own skin and in the world, and under heaven, or whatever, however you care to look at it, is a process that takes a long time, and it doesn't happen overnight just because the celebrity machine turns its powerful glance on you for a while. So it's easy to want to buy it in a pill or a vial or a syringe or twist it up in a joint or find it in a bottle. It's just, you expect to have it. You want to be able instantaneously to have that too. So that's another reason why I know you didn't ask me to talk about drugs, but it's it's something that it's a real feature of my life and career, and it's something that I've recently, in the past 5 years, have done a lot of thinking about. So, and I know that there are other areas of life where people that are particularly prey to drug abuse. Professional athletes seem to be subjected to a lot of it, but it seems to me as though that's the same. That's not a dissimilar celebrity phenomenon.
Yes, it's the same thing happening.
And you think about young arbitrageurs and bond dealers and hotshot just out of school lawyers, but that's the same sort of instant gratification, instant life, instant arrival, instant feelings. I can buy it all. I can have anything.
Well, certainly during your period of being involved so heavily, it was so pervasive and so ubiquitous. And actually, for those of us who were running record companies, it was terribly disturbing, this line to walk. You knew that people, on one hand, you weren't responsible for their lives. You know, you were neither father or
One wouldn't
mother,
presume to be
manager.
responsible for people's lives.
And on the other hand, you created this atmosphere. Well, that's okay. You know, you go make your record anything you want. Just send us the record. And it was terribly troublesome to a lot of people who were involved in this industry, knowing all this was happening, not knowing what to say because artists ruled the roost, kind of. You know, it was everything. But if you wanted it, you got it. You know, and that was it. And gave us these records and we were selling them. It was a very strange time, and I agree with you. I think that certainly in our world of music, which was a cutting edge and leading the way into it, it certainly has fallen back, and there was a lot more attitude about it, more businesslike, and finding somehow a way to control it.
Well, you know, I think the industry has become more corporate just over a period of time, largely just because I think it takes a while for people to catch on that there's money there. I mean, that it organizes itself around the money, you know, after a while. And I think in the beginning, and at least I say in the beginning, in the 50s and 60s, and during the period of time that you and I were sort of coming along in the music business, it was more sort of a maverick choice to take. You know, it wasn't an acceptable profession. It wasn't. You know, your parents, if you were a DJ or in record promotions or in management of a rock and roll club or promoting rock and roll concerts, or if you were an artist deciding you wanted to play, you know, rock and roll or folk music or blues or whatever, you know, it was sort of that. If your parents had any aspirations for you, they didn't run in those directions. You know? And now I think it's changed. Now I think it's different. I think you can take courses in it in college. You know?
It was always they'll get over it. You know, that was the attitude. They'll get over it. They've
Get
gone
over
through a
it. Right.
phase.
It's true. I mean, I didn't meet with this kind of with a whole lot of resistance from my folks when I left high school and went to New York City with Cooch to play in a rock and roll band. But I'm sure that it caused them a lot of deep concern. It wasn't exactly what they'd had in mind.
Get over it. You hit a double dip of being the moment and so forth when the second time around, now you were riding high and an artist, and now all of a sudden you marry another major artist, and you two are portrayed, I remember on the cover of Rolling Stone, as whatever the phrase was, but it implied that you were the king and queen of popular music. How did you deal with that?
Well, you know, I gotta say that I think I dealt with it mostly unconsciously. I don't think that I don't remember having any very considered opinions about it, or actually, you know, developing any sort of personal policy about it. I don't know how to put it. You know, it just we just sort of took it as it came. It was a very public marriage, and I think it suffered from that.
Were there some funny things that happened? You guys were on everybody's A list to invite. Did you laugh about it at all?
Oh, sure. Nothing. No particular incident comes to mind.
That for someone who was going to be more withdrawn and more private, that certainly pushed you out there again.
Yeah, it did. It really did. Well, you know, Carly had, I think, Carly had her own agenda to follow, you know, and her own feeling about how she wanted to deal with the publicity in the press and stuff like that. I feel as though she was more comfortable and more capable with it than I was, and I think that we didn't entirely see eye to eye on it, but you know, we were both in it.
that you survived as long as you did is it's an amazing comment, because the two young people, the fragile nature of any kind of marriage is so magnified by the glare that you guys went through.
Yes, so, yeah.
I mean, do you feel your greatest strength as a songwriter or as a singer? Where would you like to be known as one day when you hang it up?
I think probably live performer. You know, it's the only thing that it's the thing that I've worked hardest at, is live concert performance. It's the thing that has required the most discipline, and that has made up by far the largest part of my musical experience, is performing live. I'm doing an average of 15 to 20 weeks a year on the road for 20 years.
Why does that require more discipline than in the studio and singing? I mean, doesn't it almost in danger become rote?
Well, you know, maybe you do. Basically, what it comes down to is 45 minutes of or an hour of music making once every 2 years in terms of recording. But you do 3 hours a night, 6 nights or sometimes 6 nights a week, but at least 5 nights a week on the road.
What does a guy like you do to keep it fresh all the time?
Well, it has its own. It doesn't always stay fresh. Towards the end of a tour, as I mentioned before, yeah, it can start feeling a little tired, and then it's time to stop. But it just has its own dynamic, you know. No matter how tired you feel about it, you can't help but respond to an audience being there, and I think I'm blessed with good audiences. They just they're people who I enjoy playing music for, and it's a very you have to learn how to do it, you know. You have to learn how to live the life, be on the road, and give yourself what you need and fit it into a very sort of tight kind of agenda. But
do your audiences let you change the songs around? Some of the interviews I've done, Artie Shaw, what drove him crazy was that he had to play, his band had to play Begin the Begin or Stardust or whatever his big hits were, the same way every time. And Tony Bennett told me singing I Left My Heart in San Francisco. Does your audience allow you to rearrange, to freshen up an approach to a song?
Well, yeah, we rearrange them some, and also I've never had any trouble leaving any song except Steamroller out of the set. I don't have complaints or requests for it even, and I get requests for songs that would, you know, like Mill Worker or There We Are, or, you know, songs that weren't that terribly well known, but that people liked in performance, but it didn't do terribly well commercially.
What did they scream for? You got a friend?
No, they don't really. They ask for Steamroller. Maybe it's the element that wants to hear that is the most vocal. Maybe that's all there is to it.
It comes across as a performance song.
It's a performance piece, yeah.
Really terrific. You know, there's a story in your first album, For One Is a Sweet Baby James album, about the suite for 20G, which I always thought was one of the best stories we had, and that there's this mystic approach to it, and really was to get another $20,000.
Oh yeah, on completion of the album, we had one track to go. Well, you know, the album took us 2 weeks to make, and it was made for a budget of $8,000, I guess. But we were told that we were given some money to make the record, and then upon completion, I say we, Peter Asher and I, who was managing and producing me at that point and has produced most of my records. He and I needed the money. He had moved to, he had left Apple. He'd taken a part-time job at MCA, I think. MGM, excuse me, MGM. And had moved to Los Angeles and rented a house, and was really sort of flying on a shoestring. We needed to bring that album in and get paid that money, so we made this. We combined a whole lot of songs together and called it a suite, and we didn't know what to name it. And that just seemed like the obvious thing.
Yeah. And after that, the some of the critics and some of the reviews had all kinds of allusions to some
Did they?
hotel suite
I see, yeah.
or something that was so mystical. And I know because I was the guy that said to Peter, look, I can't give you the 20,000 until you give me the things. So you got to go finish it.
I remember bringing into your office too, that bringing the whole record in and playing it.
And we sat and listened to it together. The three of us.
That's right.
I just did last week in London. I did an interview with Van Morrison, who was another artist that I was involved with to a great degree. And, and when his lyrics are dissected and analyzed by the most erudite critics, and I said to him, what about that? He says, it's a lot of crap. He says, I don't know what they're talking about. He says, I read some of this stuff. He says, I don't know, what do they mean? He says, if you follow my lyrics, it goes from here to there. He says, why have they got me out here somewhere? He says, well, that's, of course, the whole area of rock criticism and writers like that came along with you guys. It started in the late 60s.
Uh-huh.
There had never been anything like that before.
Yeah, I think that's, that was the time at which popular music sort of acquired some real pretentious sort of airs.
Oh, yes.
I mean, and some of it was well founded. Some of the Beatles stuff and Dylan's things. They really were literature, but a lot of it was just popular music, and I think it helps to just, that point of view. It's only rock and roll. It's really the right tack to take. Sure.
How's your life now?
Well, really, it's really pretty great. I'm amazed.
You're remarried, aren't you?
I'm remarried. Catherine and I have been together for 7 years, but we've been married for 2. And I'm 40 years old. I think it's the time of life when things become real. I think when you're 20 and in your early 30s, there's still lots of possibilities. Everything is wide open, and you have a very, in some cases, romantic, sometimes fearful, but and sometimes enthusiastic and ebullient, and sometimes anxious, but always some sort of a conceptual view of what your life is going to be like. But by this time, 40 to 50, it's largely what it is going to be. And I think that's kind of a crushing blow to a lot of people to find that. You have your kids are who they are. Your job is what it is. You've got your home is where you've made it, and there the devil is. You've got a mortgage and an income and a job. Your job is what it is. What you do is what it is. What you have become is what it is. What physically your body is like, that's what it is. Although maybe you're beginning to lose your hair and slow down a little bit, and you may need major dentistry or whatever.
But the path is set.
But basically, a lot of the mystery doors have been opened, and the contents are clearly there, and I think that's critical to a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people look at that and fold up a little bit around it, and say, no, this isn't at all what I had. But not to go on at too great a length, because if there's one thing I've gone on too much about in my career, it's drug abuse, and that other people have gone on about me for me. But in the past 5 years, I feel myself beyond that, and it does give you a second chance. So at the same time as things are becoming sort of more set and more specific, there is a real element of newness to it, of real renewal.
Yes, of course you've had that.
For me in my life, and sort of an openness, and it's really quite a fascinating trip. I mean, I actually am daily amazed,
You got yourself another life.
Well, it feels like
easily
that.
could have been.
That's another thing that happens around this particular time of life. If you have been an addict, say since you're 20, or if you were a drinker, or if you were a smoker, or it doesn't even need to be a substance. If you were a believer in a strong ideal, or if you were a subscriber to a particular religious point of view. You know, this is the period of time, about 20 years, you know, into that, is when the thing starts to fall apart. If you're a drinker, it's when you have to, you know, most people around, it's a common time for people to give it up, or to start to face it as a real problem anyway. Same thing goes with 20 years of smoking cigarettes, you know. I mean, there are a lot of things that we contend to compulsively center our lives on, that around this period of time tend to fall through. So I find this to be an interesting stage to be on.
You see your children? Well, you got a boy, Ben. Wasn't Ben? What's his name?
Ben is the boy, Sally is the girl. Ben,
How old are they?
Ben is 11 this week. Sally just turned 14 last week.
Any musical ability?
Oh, some, yeah, certainly a lot of interest. Ben plays keyboards and Sally sings. She's in the regional choir in the sort of public school system in Massachusetts where they go to school.
Where they go, the vineyards? Or?
They're on the vineyard this year, I think.
Do you ever get up to the vineyard at all?
I was up there a week ago, but I haven't been up there much this fall. This particular fall, I've been on the road.
I remember you built a house.
I did. I built a house, and Carly now has that house.
Oh, she has that house? And then you were going to buy some land up around Santa Barbara once. Did you ever do that?
I know. Me and Russ Kunkel went up there to look at
Yeah.
some, but it never really happened. I think I'm too centered on the East Coast. I could never really, in spite of the fact that I worked so often out there, and everybody I play with, except for Don Grolnick, my keyboard player, everybody lives out there.
Well, I tell you, James, some of the best memories and thoughts and feelings I have about the business center around you, and the things that we shared, because we did kind of grow up together there. I had been at Warner's before, but that was the flowering of the time there.
Yeah, they were hot days. There's no
Wow,
doubt about
what
it.
a
You know.
record company that
And it
became.
can't last in the same way forever. But I really, you know, and sometimes I look back at them and wish I'd been less conflicted about enjoying them. I wish I'd been more capable of just saying, look at this and enjoy it, because, you know, it's a flower. And there is an element of that to it too. But
I asked Robbie Robertson about it. I said, was it that good? Was it really that good, or do we all think the good old days? He says, no, it was really that good, because we were doing something brand new. There was nothing before us, really. I mean, there'd been this Presley breakthrough, and then the folk scare of the 60s or some of that, but it sat there, and all of a sudden, here it came. All these talented people came.
Yeah, it was hot.
Dylan and the Beatles, and writers and singers, and so many of them. Now, here you are, 20 years later, working some years, as you say, 30 weeks a year. You wonder, whatever the success of the artists who are now currently at the top of the list, how long live that will be, because they face the problem, while they sell an enormous number, they're very successful, is they're not doing anything new. It has already, the new world was discovered back then.
Well, I think, you know, doesn't seem likely that there will be more than one or two of them a year at the most who will be doing something new and who will go on to establish themselves in that way. You know, I don't know how long I'll be able to. Sometimes I feel I have an album coming out this week, and I feel that when you're about to put something out, you really start to question yourself and what your worth is. And can be an anxious time. For me, it is anyway. But so perhaps that's what's going on in my mind right now. But I begin to ask myself how much longer I can stand up on stage and perform. You know, if it's not somehow of another time in my life, and I'll be passing beyond it. You know, the fact is, I'm not trained to do anything else.
Yes,
I mean, I can't be a computer operator.
that's it. And you may find at some point it's a job that you go to, but you do it, and you do it as long as you have to, and as long as you want to, I guess.
Right.
But that was, I thank you for this, but, you know, I really